everyone! Today's video will be devoted to working with Twig as part of the Symfony project. Twig is a convenient template engine for PHP. To start use Twig in your Symfony project, first you need to install it using this command. If you check your project folder, you see there templates folder that was appeared after installing Twig Bundle Component, and there is base.html.twig file inside it. Let's open it. It looks like simple HTML file, but with some difference. For example, this syntax with % symbols used to run some logic. For example, if condition or for loop. This syntax with hash symbols used to add comments to the template. Actually, these comments are not included in the rendered page. And this syntax with double curly braces used to display the content of a variable or the result of evaluating an expression. As for base.html.twig file, it's needed in the concept of template inheritance. It defines the common elements of all application templates, such as header, footer, and so on. More about template inheritance I'll tell later in the video. Unlike HTML, you can't run PHP code inside Twig templates, but you can use utilities provided by Twig and run some logic in the templates. Let's open Twig documentation and try something of that. To match the URL with the Twig template, we need to create a controller and an action in it. A link to a detailed video on how to render Twig templates from a controller will now appear in the top right corner. If you use this construction in your template, then all this text will be displayed on the page in uppercase. Also, as you can see, there are a lot of block tags in our base template. They are used for inheritance. And we move on. If you need to create a new template, just create it in the templates folder. Here it Symfony recommends to use snake case to name folders or Twig files. Also, file names have to contain two extensions. Here it. The first is HTML or XML or something else, and the second one is Twig. By the way, templates can generate any text format. So to simplify work with different formats, double extensions are used. So let's create a new template following the rules that I talked about. We have not yet reached the topic of inheritance, so we will create a basic HTML document structure in this file. And let's change the template that is being rendered to a new one in the controller. When you create a controller that renders this template, you can pass to it the needed variables. I'll show it. And now we can display this variable in our template using double curly braces syntax. So, this array defines the variables passed to the template, and this key defines the variable name, and this value defines the value of the variable. And in our case, we used the variable part of the URL as the value of our variable. In this case, it is also recommended to use snake case for variable names. This variable is quite simple. The most commonly used are complex PHP variables, such as arrays and objects. I'll show you how to work with them. So, this syntax provides quick access to complex PHP variables. In this case, you want to display first name stored in the variable username. It doesn't matter, is username an array or an object? Also, it doesn't matter, is first name a property or a method? When you use syntax that I showed, Twig tries to get the value of the variable. First from an array and its element. Second from an object and its public property. Third from an object and its public method. Fourth from an object and its getter method. Fifth from an object and its ether method. Sixth from an object and its header method. Oh, and one more thing that I want to show you. You can get random number using Twig random function right in the template. This is I was talking about before. I strongly recommend you to discover this page with all its tags, filters, functions, tests, and so on. There are a lot of helpful things. And we move on. In your Symfony application, you can use a global variable called app. This variable is available to you from any Twig template by default. It gives you access to some application information. For example, about current user object if it is authenticated, about the request object, about session object that represents the current user's session, about flash messages stored in the session, about current configuration environment. Also, it returns a Boolean value if the application is in debug mode. And also you can get a token interface object. So, let's try this global variable and get information about current configuration environment. More about app global variable you can learn from the Symfony documentation. If you need to insert a link in your template, you can do it using path or URL function with the route name as the first argument, and another optional arguments are route parameters. So, path function generates relative URLs and URL function generates absolute URLs. What is the use of these functions? If you change the link in the route for any reason, then you don't have to make any changes to the templates, as template will automatically generate a new URL. Let's try it. figured out how to correctly insert links into the template. And now let's figure out how to correctly connect CSS and JS in the template, and also how to correctly specify the src attribute of the image. For this, Symfony provides an asset twig function to help generate that URL. But first we need to install the asset package. Let's do it. Now we can try asset function, but first I want to pay your attention to the fact that folders with images, CSS and JS files must be created in the public folder of your Symfony project. Absolute URLs for assets, just use for this corresponding twig function. I'll show it. And note that if your application lives at the root of your host, I mean here, then the rendered path should look like in this case. But if it lives in subdirectory, for example, something like this, then each asset should render with the subdirectory. And we move on. Next, let's figure out where you can render Twig templates. We did it in the controller, but actually templates can be rendered not only from the controller. They can also be rendered in services, emails, directly from the road. But let's start with the controller. Everything is very simple if your controller extends AbstractController. Then you can use render method, here it, and return it. The first argument of this method is corresponding template that should be rendered. Here it. And the second optional argument is array with variables if they are needed. Here it. If your controller doesn't extend from AbstractController, you'll need to fetch environment service in your controller and then just use its render method. I'll show it. And we need to do one more thing. We need to add asControl.php attribute above the class. We have to do this because our controller doesn't extend AbstractController. So we need to apply the controller.service _arguments tag to our controller services. And if we add asController attribute, it will be done automatically. Also, as I said earlier, we can render a template in service. It's easier to show how to do it than explain it. So, let's go. as for the rendering of templates in emails, we will not dwell on this topic in detail. This is a topic for a separate video. And we move on. So, let's figure out how to render a template directly from a road. Your application may contain static pages that do not require any variables. For example, it could be a privacy policy and so on. So, you can render such static pages directly from the road definition in YAML, XML or PHP file. And we will use for this special template controller provided by Symfony. I'll show the example with YAML file. You can also pass some default parameters such as status code, options that you need to set the page cache, and so on. More about this you can find in Symfony documentation. Also, as for rendering a template from XML or PHP configuration files, you can explore in Symfony documentation. As you already know from my previous videos about routing, by default Symfony loads the routes defined in YAML format. For XML and PHP formats, you need to add support in kernel.php file. In upper right corner you find a link to a video that will help you with this task. It's possible to check the existence of a template, and I'll show you how to check this using the example of the service that we created earlier. Now let's talk about reusing template contents. It often happens that the same fragment of a Twig template is found on different pages. In such cases, the repeating fragment can be moved to a separate Twig file and reused in other templates. I'll show an example. And one more thing I want to tell you. Symfony recommends to start the name of template fragments from underline. It will help to better differentiate between full templates and template fragments. service. Let's just hardcode the variable for the page rendering, because we use it in user info template, and without it we will get an error. So we used include function to add HTML fragment from user info template to the my first template and to the base template. And include function takes as argument the path of the template to include, and user info template has access to all the variables of the templates that includes it. Also, you can pass variables to the included template. Here, Twig expect user variable, but for example, in my first template, we haven't this variable. But we can say that user the same as username, that first name variable. Here it in controller. Username and first name. And because of that, everything will work. There are some situations when using the include function is not very convenient. For example, we need block with the 3 last block articles that we will display in different pages. To do that, we need to make a database query to get those articles. And if we use the include function, we need to do the same database query in every page that includes that block. In this case, the best way is to empt the result of executing some controller with the render and controller Twig functions. Let's try it. I made some previous work not to take up your time. Now I'll tell you what I did. Please note that links to videos with more detailed information on the topic will appear in the upper right corner. So, using my Twig bundle, I created article entity with 3 columns: ID, title, and description. Also, there are getter and setter methods was created. There was generated the article repository with save and remove methods. Also, I created a factory to produce new articles. Then I set it up the database, and after that I updated the schema. Also, I created a new action in controller. Here it. And if we visit the corresponding road, then a new entry will be added to the database. And after all these preparations, I filled the table in the database with test data. Now let's create in our controller an action that will render 3 last articles. need to create this recent articles Twig file. Now we have possibility to call controller from any Twig template to empt its result. You can use controller function to define the controller to execute instead of using public URL. Note, if you use the controller function, controllers are not accessed using a regular Symfony route, but through a special URL used exclusively to serve source template fragments, and we need to configure that special URL. Now let's find out about template inheritance and layouts. In your Symfony application, a lot of elements will be repeated between pages. For example, it can be a header, footer, sidebar, and so on. In the case when pages have a common structure, it's better to use inheritance. For medium and complex applications, Symfony recommends three-level template inheritance. The first level is base.html.twig file that defines the common elements of all applications. It can be a header, footer, and so on. The second level is layout.html.twig file. It defines the content structure used in most of the pages. For example, two-column content on the page will be defined exactly in this second level. The third level is other Twig files that extend from the main layout Twig file or maybe any other section layout. Let's try this layered structure in practice. Please note, in case of using extends, in a child template, you can define template parts only inside of a block. In other case, you'll get a syntax error. You already know that by default your Symfony application accesses templates located in the templates folder, which was generated after installing the Twig bundle. But what if you need to use templates located in other folder? It's possible. For this we need to set up Twig configuration file. In this case, Symfony will first look for a template in public/templates, and if you have two templates with the same names in different folders, you may render the wrong template. Twig solves this problem with namespaces. I'll show how it works. Now, if we want to render the template from default folder, we just leave the way it was. But if you need to render the template from the new templates folder, just type the next. I hope you enjoy this video and see you next time.